let's now speak to Grant Shapps, who is supporting Rishi Sunak. Good morning to you.
Morning.
That must have been, you must have felt very relieved last night when you heard that Boris Johnson was pulling out of the race.
Well, I think Boris I thought his statement was interesting because he's clearly recognised, I think, what probably quite a lot of the party and country were feeling, which is, this is time to pull together. He recognised that he didn't have quite the support so quickly for his return in the parliamentary party. And that actually it was therefore better not to go forward. I mean, it's essentially what he said in his statement. I think he's right about that. I mean, I think he did, many great things. I'm thinking about ending the whole Brexit thing, the way that he got us vaccinated first, his response to Ukraine. But I also think, there are some matters outstanding, and to come back so quickly would have been potentially problematic. And I think he recognised all of that.
He also says you can't govern effectively unless you have a united party in Parliament. Is that going to be the situation that Rishi Sunak faces as well? Or do you think that was a Boris Johnson specific problem?
Well, I think he was concerned. I mean, in fact, I've spoken to him about this over the last few days. I think he was concerned, as I was, about, that he had, I think, 60 ministers have resigned. It would be difficult for many of those to have served. So I think, I hope that Boris does make a return at some point, actually. I think he's got more to offer in public life here internationally yet. But I think it is too soon, and I think he recognised that fact too.
Okay. Now, in his statement, Boris Johnson talks about kind of overtures that he made to Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak, but ultimately they came to nothing. What were the discussions?
Well, I wasn't in the room for those discussions. You'll understand, but I mean, I think about the future of the party and the future of the country, and different ways to work together. Ultimately, we live in a democracy, and people are able to put themselves forward to for election, including as prime minister. And that sort of tie up clearly didn't work out, wasn't going to work out. But I think we will see, I think, Boris nationally, I suspect even internationally, be active in public life again in the future, I imagine.
How worried are you about how divided the party is? I mean, I think it's fair to say that they are. People have talked about the psychodrama of the current Conservative Party, the kind of tribes that exist. I just want to read you a tweet from Nadine Dorries, who we're speaking to on this programme shortly. She said, if Rishi Sunak were to win, the focus of the Privileges Committee, I'm absolutely certain, would move straight on to Rishi Sunak and what he knew in order to embolden Labour's call for a general election. With Rishi, we will be in general election territory within weeks. That's something she tweeted yesterday.
Well, Nadine is always fairly outspoken, I think it's fair to say. But I don't agree. I think that what Rishi would do if he does become Prime Minister is focus us back on the 2019 manifesto, which actually was the thing that we set out to deliver. Of course, there have been diversions along the way, including coronavirus and including the war in Ukraine. But actually, fundamentally, that is the document that people voted for. Rishi will take us closer to that. And so I don't agree. I think that he has the best opportunity to do that. I think the plan he set out in the summer has fundamentally been shown to be the right one, which is rather than cutting taxes first and adding it to borrowings, instead to bear down on inflation, grow the economy, and then cut taxes. And I think the not just the markets, but actually households will take comfort from that, because it will mean that mortgages don't go up more than they need to for international reasons, not added to domestically, car loans and all the rest of it. And I think that really matters to families in this country.
You talked about taxes. What about spending? What might Rishi Sunak have to do there? Because you understand there are people very nervous about that, people who are already suffering because of the cost of living. And the optics for them of someone who is very rich imposing spending cuts or austerity, whatever you want to call it, on people who are struggling right now is going to be a difficult one.
So one of the things that I liked about what Rishi was saying in the summer, and if he wins, he would get the opportunity to implement, is the idea of being responsible with the nation's purse, the fiscal responsibility, but also looking after the most vulnerable in society as well. And I think that balance is very important. Clearly, everyone understands we're going through difficult times. And let's not forget, we're going through difficult times because of energy prices going up, because of Putin's evil war. I mean, every country in the world is suffering from this. That's where it comes from. I think what's important is that we make sure that people who are least able to look after themselves are taken care of by a government that has its heart in the right place. I think that's really important.
Now, the country is crying out for stability, and so are the markets, clearly. Do you think that it is more likely that there will be stability for both those people if we continue with Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor and perhaps you as Home Secretary?
Well, look, I see what you're doing there very cleverly, asking me about what appointments a new Prime Minister should or might make, which you'll understand would be up to the new Prime Minister. So I'll refrain from answering. What I will say, though, I think Jeremy Hunt's done a very good job in the last very short period of time in stabilising the markets and setting out a direction. So I think that's been good. If Rishi becomes Prime Minister, he will have to decide on the layout of his top team. Who does what, and obviously we'll wait to see what happens. But one thing I do know, actually, is that he will make it a government of all the talents. He will look for people who are genuinely the best in the job. He'll be, I think, less interested in who supported whom, but more interested in getting the job done. And I think that's really, really important in British democracy.
Okay, that is the Home Secretary, Grant Shapps. Let's see if he remains the Home Secretary. He may well do.
Bit of shade there as well on Liz Truss, not appoint people who are genuinely the best at the job. I mean, not to be cruel, that she did make him Home Secretary, didn't she? just before the end there. But will he stay around? We'll find out. Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, was listening to that interview. Interesting thing. He struck the note which Jeremy Hunt has struck, which is the idea of compassionate conservatism, that idea of the thing that got them elected, the 2019 manifesto, levelling up, compassionate conservatism, not just trying to grow the pie for everyone, but looking after the people that hitherto have been not properly looked after in Britain. Is that a change back to 2019? It's definitely a shift away from Liz Truss, isn't it?
I think it is a shift away from Liz Truss if Rishi Sunak does pursue that idea. And I think he will. He has in the past shown himself to be more interested in targeted interventions as Chancellor. We did get some schemes that were universal during the COVID pandemic, but that was because of very particular circumstances around the coronavirus. But I thought it was fascinating that Grant Shapps suggested we would see a return to the 2019 manifesto. It really is extraordinary how quickly events have been moving in the past few days at breakneck speed. And because Boris Johnson is such a magnet for attention, there really has been very little scrutiny of what exactly Rishi Sunak will do when it comes to governing. Do even his vows from the summer leadership campaign still apply, as well as tax and spend, where obviously the main questions are? In the summer, for example, he suggested he would cap the number of refugees he'd allow into this country and redefine asylum. He said that he would reverse what he described as clumsy, gender-neutral language, which has served to erase women, and would launch a new manifesto of women's rights. Do things like that still apply? We just don't know. So
his supporters presumably don't even know, because he's not had that much time to spend over the last 2 or 3 days even going around talking to Tory MPs, let alone members.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. So there will be just so many questions that he will need to answer in coming days about what his government will do. And I think this idea of the mandate that he has isn't going to go away. There are there is a growing sense among some Tory MPs, some other wider Boris backers, including the likes of Zach Goldsmith, Tory peer, saying that another election, general election, is now inevitable because the party is on to its third prime minister, and it seems to have moved so far away from the manifesto on which it was elected.
But yet the electoral reality is such that what would force that general election? I mean, if you've just taken over as Prime Minister as Rishi Sunak, you're not going to want to face electoral oblivion in the first couple of months, are you?
You're certainly not going to want that, but it feels to me that the clamour is growing from the opposition. We're heading towards a really difficult winter. We're seeing more strikes today. BT Openreach, Liverpool dock workers this morning starting new strikes. We could see a situation where there are protesters crowding Parliament Square every single day, demanding an election. That to me doesn't seem implausible.
And just finally, Lucy, before you go, have you heard anything that might suggest Penny Mordaunt could get on a ballot for the members? Has anything moved so far this morning?
Well, her campaign have put out a survey from Delta Poll that suggests she is more trusted than Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. Other questions in that poll that suggest that voters would like her. However, it doesn't feel that her campaign is picking up any momentum with new nominations.
No, and they need to get the finger out if they're going to do that, don't they? Because they've got till 2 o'clock today. Otherwise, Rishi Sunak is the de facto leader of the Conservative Party and then the Prime Minister of this country. Lucy Fisher, thank you very much indeed.
And it doesn't look like it would happen, but you know what? There could be a final twist.
Yeah.
You just never know.
You don't.
We don't know anymore. We don't know anything anymore. Now, we've been speaking to Tory party members. We spoke to Sunil earlier, who was a Boris Johnson supporter. But if there is no contest today, if Penny Mordaunt does not get above 100 votes, then there will be no contest. The Tory party members won't vote. Let's speak now to George. George Myers, who is a Rishi Sunak supporter and Tory party member. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So it's looking good for your man.
It is. I think it was inevitable that we were going to get here. I'm glad that it looks like we're going to get there without it needing to go out to a ballot. That's, I think, a bit of a waste of time, a bit of a distraction. It's not the way to secure unity in the party. The best thing to do now, I think, would be for Mordaunt to put her hands up and say, "Yep, I gave it a good go." But that campaign, I think, has now run its course.
Now, I presume you voted for Rishi Sunak last time around as well. What did you make of Liz Truss's 45 days?
I didn't make a whole lot of them. I mean, it wasn't really. I think 45 days is almost generous to say that she had that time as Prime Minister. Of course, we had the very tragic death of the Queen, and then we had the conference break. So her time as actually actively being Prime Minister was significantly less than that. And in that time, she basically managed to get everything wrong that Rishi said she would, and it led to the negative effects that Rishi sort of predicted would occur.
What do you think? How do you think that that Rishi Sunak, if he wins, can unite the party? Because I think I'm stating the obvious here when I say that the party, your party, seems to be incredibly divided. Let me just read this out from Nadine Dorris very quickly. I'm going to summarise actually. She tweeted this last night. If Rishi Sunak were to win, the focus of the Privileges Committee would move straight on to Rishi Sunak. With Rishi, we will be in general election territory within weeks. What do you think of that point of view? Because there are clearly people within the Conservative Party who really just they cannot get behind Rishi Sunak.
I should think which point Nadine Dorries was making, of course, she was backing Boris. I'm not sure if she's come out for either Rishi or Penny yet. But she was probably making a point that Boris had a mandate with having won the general election, something that Rishi doesn't have, and nor does Mordaunt. And she's right in that. But of course, Boris is no longer standing. I think it's going to be immensely hard to unite the party. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at the way that the MPs are coming out in support of Rishi on the whole, quite overwhelmingly, I think he is more of a unity candidate. He also clearly was one of the two that did manage to get onto the ballot back in the summer. That's something's got to be said for that. I think that the party membership, the grassroots on the whole, probably would prefer Mordaunt, but they also clearly preferred Truss. So maybe as a member of a Tory party grassroots, maybe we shouldn't have that final say. Maybe we should give this one over to the MPs.
Oh, interesting. Right, George, thank you for that. That's George Myers, who is a Tory party member. He's 22 years old and he is supporting Rishi Sunak for the second time.
Just about the question of general election, two very opposing views here. The Tories are in marriage guidance counselling and the country has to sit back and watch. They need to call a general election, says Sarah. And Greg says, what nonsense this call for a general election is. There's no constitutional need whatsoever. And that's the argument that they don't have to, so maybe they shouldn't. But will the pressure keep building? We wonder. 87222, start your message to the word Times or tweet us at Times Radio. In a moment, we're going to talk to Damien Collins, who's a Tory MP and a Penny Mordaunt supporter. What is the point of that support at the moment? We'll find out from him in a moment. This is Breakfast on Times Radio with Asma Mir and Stig Abel with Service Now, using technology to make work better.